You know, a lot of my recent videos have been kind of out there. I've covered topics like Fire Emblem, Papa Louie, Rhythm Paradise, but I want to go back to something familiar, something I've done plenty of times before. So yeah, let's talk about Pokemon. I'm sure you know about this by now, but Pokemon is no stranger to redesigns. Being a series that remakes its older games, a lot of characters get to have their designs updated. And I gotta say, I really like these redesigns. But there is one region that wasn't so lucky, that being the Sinnoh region. The Sinnoh remakes took a bit of a different approach, trying to replicate the look and feel of the original games. So sadly, we didn't get any redesigned characters. But you know what? We didn't need to get hung up and complain about this. As an artist myself, I can make my own redesigns, so why don't I give it a try? Specifically, I want to redesign some of Sinnoh's most notable faces, the one and only gym leaders. For this video, I'm going to redesign 4 of the 8 gym leaders, and try to talk you through my process. Not much else to say, so let's get started. So just to clarify, I'm not doing these redesigns in any particular order, aside from the order I drew them of course. So we're going to start with Fantina, the ghost-type gym leader, and one of my personal favourites in Sinnoh. Also, since my last video, I've made some changes to how I draw proportions, so you may notice that the head and eyes are smaller than what I usually draw. I want my designs to feel less top-heavy, and I'm trying to lean closer into the cool anime vibes that I'm such a fan of. But anyway, let's talk about Fantina's design. Going into this redesign, I knew that I wanted to add more colours to her outfit. The original dress was just the one colour with nothing to break it up, but we can add a bit more visual interest. I started by looking up ballroom dancers to see if I could take any real-world inspiration, and the first idea I got was to give her some veils that hang from the arms. But for extra flair, I figured I could shape the veils to match the arms of Miss Magius, one of her signature Pokemon. I also split the top piece of her dress into sections, in order to break up the colours, and make it more interesting to look at. I tend to do this with a lot of my character designs, but as a general tip, you don't need to make every section a different colour, it's okay if 2 match. As for the lower half of the dress, I ended up having a bit of a struggle. At first, I had the idea of giving it these big showy frills. I was really tempted to go for something glamorous, but I was having a really hard time drawing the frills. And the thing is, Pokemon character designs are meant to be simple. I was definitely overcompensating because of how plain the original design was, and I ended up forgetting to keep things simple along the way. So in the end, I got rid of the frills, and I kept the skirt more faithful to the original design. And that's an important thing about redesigns. I want to change things to make them more interesting, but I don't want to go so far that I lose the original design. Gotta keep it recognisable. As for some other changes, I put these 3 pink gems on Fantina's collar, to match the gems on Miss Magius. I also kept the yellow cross on the hip, which was meant to match Drifblim, her other signature Pokemon. It might be a bit clashing with some of the new additions, but I wanted to keep it anyway, since it's pretty iconic to Fantina. I also wanted to change the shoes to a lighter lilac, so that they aren't the same colour as the dress. What, do you want your shoes to blend in with the rest of your clothes? Moving right along, I didn't change much about the head area. I don't normally draw this kind of long head shape, but it's always good to experiment with my style. And of course, I had to keep Fantina's iconic hairstyle the same. It's one of the most unique styles in the series, and that's saying a lot. Pokemon really excels at designing unique hairstyles. Though I did make her bangs a lot more pronounced. The fringe area felt kind of empty. And then there's the matter of the colours. I made the dress more of a traditional purple, instead of the reddish shade in the original design. This was largely a personal decision, I was just picking colours that appeal to me personally. Though I do think this shade fits in better with the general ghost type colour scheme. So overall, I really like how Fantina's redesign came together. I liked incorporating elements of Miss Magius while keeping the influence from Drifblim, kind of mixing both of her signature Pokemon into one design. I also really enjoyed adding the sparkle and shine to the dress. If there's one thing you should know about me, it's that I love drawing shiny things. So here we are, here's our first redesign. And here's the original as a point of comparison. Let me know what you think of her in the comments. So now that we've finished Fantina, it's on to our second redesign, Byron, the Steel-type gym leader. Now this is a bit of an interesting one to tackle, because I didn't know where to start at first. In fact, the main reason why I wanted to redesign him was because of Taylor, a fellow artist and friend acquaintance, I guess? That seems to be the best word to describe him. So Taylor's been known to complain about the Sinnoh designs on a regular basis, and that's actually part of what inspired me to make this video. But the thing he's always first to bring up are Byron's rectangle trousers, which I'm kind of surprised I never noticed before. So looking at Byron's outfit, I wasn't too sure of what to change at first, aside from the trousers. I knew that I wanted to add something to make the design more interesting, since this is a pretty plain outfit outside of the cape. I mean, hey, the cape does look cool, but I want to give them a bit more than that. Like with Fantina, I looked up some references to get some ideas, specifically some pictures of miners. And that's where I got a great idea. I was going to give Byron some suspenders. Definitely something I don't draw often, but I found they were a pretty great fit for him. I also changed the trousers, of course, taking some inspiration from those references I found. Aside from changing the shape to be not rectangles, I gave the trousers some crisscrossing straps to match with the suspenders. It ended up being a pretty out there design, especially with the split into two sections. It almost looks like the trousers have suspenders too. But hey, I had fun putting it together. Beyond that, I really didn't change much with Byron's outfit. The boots are mostly unchanged, but you can see more of them because the trousers are tucked in. Feels a bit more practical that way. I also moved his cape higher up, to make the suspenders more visible. Totally not to show more bare arms, what are you talking about? Overall, the process for this redesign was definitely simpler than it was for Fantina, partly because I knew to avoid overcomplicating it, but also because it was a less drastic change. Honestly, the most I have to talk about with this art comes from Byron's face and hair. For starters, I found the hairstyle really tricky to draw. It's a very classic Pokemon hairstyle, but I struggled to translate it into my art style. Definitely messed with my head a bit. That being said, there's plenty I liked about drawing Byron's head. For starters, it was fun drawing an older looking character, with the face lines and all. I also like how I stylized the black eyes, along with the thick eyebrows. But my favourite part of this art is definitely the jagged shine that I use as lighting for the hair. It feels right at home in the Pokemon style, and I love how it turned out. So on the whole, Byron was pretty fun to redesign. It's a much less drastic change than Fantina, but it still does what it set out to do. My only real gripe is, I wish I remembered to include a reference to his signature Pokemon Bastiodon, like I did with Fantina and Miss Magus, but oh well. Here we go. Here's the final redesign, and once again, here's the original for comparison. And Taylor, if you're watching this, how much of an improvement are the trousers? Please let me know. Now, when I first decided that I wanted to make this video, I thought I was just going to stop with Fantina and Byron, but I knew that if I split this redesign project into any more than 2 videos, I'd never have the motivation to come back and complete it. So I decided to throw in another 2 gym leaders to give us 4 in total. So next on our list is the first gym leader, the rock-type specialist Roark, who's actually Byron's son. Very fitting that I'm drawing them back to back. Now, going into these next 2 redesigns, I went a bit lighter on the research front. At first, I was hoping to integrate some Cranidos into Roark's design, to make up for my mistake with his dad, but nothing came to mind at any point. But anyway, my first idea with Roark was to give him some long sleeves. I don't know, I just thought they suited him. And I also decided to give him a scarf, which leaned the design into more of a cold weather look. I mean, Sinnoh does have a general colder climate, and with Roark being the first gym leader we meet, I think it fits. Though I did end up questioning the inclusion of the jacket. What with Roark being a miner, I don't think he'd want to bring a white jacket down into the mines. That sounds like a surefire way to get it dirty. But then I figured, he doesn't need to wear the jacket down in the mines, it can just be what he wears outside work. While on the topic of the jacket, I also messed around with the shape of the collar a lot. I never really noticed it before, but I really like the shape of Roark's jacket collar. It's probably my favourite part of his design now. As for some other outfit changes, I decided to give Roark a proper belt, because that feels like a must for miners in my head. I also gave him a different pair of boots with a strap buckle, but I eventually realised that this is terrible footwear for the mines. So after I stopped recording, I changed the boots back to their original design. Moving on to the colours, I kept them pretty faithful to the original, like with the other designs. Though I did make the jacket and trousers more of a bluish colour, which was actually inspired by Cranidos' colour scheme, so I guess I did manage to reference his signature Pokemon in the end. I also decided to make the trousers a bit darker, so they weren't the same shade as the jacket. It just felt like giving some variety there. Looking back, Roark and Byron's colour schemes were clearly meant to match. They both have a grey and black outfit with the same yellow accents. But for this redesign, I ended up giving them both pretty different colours. Though I did end up adding a brown item to both designs, what with Roark's scarf and Byron's suspenders. Now that was a total coincidence, but kind of cool to notice. So there we go, here's the finished Roark. And as you can see, I changed the boots back to their original design. Overall, I'm not quite so sure about this design. I already like the original so much, so I tried a very different direction for the redesign, but I may have lost a bit of Roark along the way. Do you like it better? Worse? Let me know. Okay, so now we're on to the final redesign of the video, Gardenia, the Grass-type gym leader. And for this redesign, I was determined to integrate the signature Pokemon somehow. So Gardenia kind of has two signature Pokemon in my eyes, Roserade and Cherrim. I feel like a lot of people associate gym leaders with just the one ace, but there's nothing saying they can't have two iconic team members. I feel like that's the case with all of Paldea's gym leaders, where they all have an ace that they terrestrialize, but then they also have a Gen 9 Pokemon that feels more like their signature. Like, Grusha's strongest Pokemon is his terrestrial Altaria, but Titan is the Pokemon that feels most iconic to him. Which, by the way, I did actually make a two-part series where I made regional variants for all the Paldea gym aces. Granted, the voice acting definitely shows its age, but I still recommend it if you want more Pokemon content from me. But anyway, back to Gardenia. Going into the redesign, I knew I wanted to incorporate elements of Roserade, and I had a pretty solid idea. I was going to take the red and blue colours of Roserade's roses and add them as details onto Gardenia's capelet. At first, I was thinking of decorating the capelet with literal flowers, but I don't know, it didn't work out. So instead, I decided to go for strips of colour with a rose pattern. Though I eventually found this was too plain, and too much of a non-presence in the design. But I didn't end up changing it until the very end, so we'll get back to that. One thing I was nervous to draw was Gardenia's hair, which is another great example of Pokemon's unique hairstyles. But because it's so geometric, I didn't think it would translate well into my art style, since I tend to draw hair very messy and loose. But in the end, I did manage to get the hair to look right. I also added these thick locks at the back for some extra style. Getting back to the clothes, I wanted to add a small yellow collar to the capelet, as another thing to match with Roserade. I also changed the back of the capelet to these two long scarf-like cape sections, as another reference to Roserade. This is probably my favourite feature of the redesign. For the rest of the outfit, I gave Gardenia elbow-length gloves to cover her arms instead of sleeves, just to give some more variety. I kept her cargo shorts, but I changed the ends to look more like petals, instead of just being kind of torn. I also added these little strings to the front of the shorts, you know the ones. And I gave her taller boots, yet another element borrowed from Roserade. And finally, I gave Gardenia a couple of accessories, namely the red beads on the shorts and the blue cross on the hair. I mostly just added these so that the red and blue wasn't just limited to the capelet. Speaking of, let's get back to that capelet, because after I finished this art, I went back the next day to make some tweaks. I made the red and blue rim to the capelet thicker, and I tried again to integrate actual flowers, but I still couldn't get it to work. In the end, I settled for a petal-like rim, similarly to the shorts, and I also pinned a single flower on both ends of the capelet. So there we are, here's our finished Gardenia. This design didn't go quite where I thought it would, but I'm actually really happy with it. I love the zigzag highlight on the hair, the cape ends are a fun shape, and I like the cute little mouth. I should definitely experiment more with mouth shapes. So there we have it, and that's the end of the video. And here's our 4 finished redesigns. I think my favourite is Fantina, but I'd love to know what you guys think. Leave your thoughts on these redesigns in the comments. And let me know if you want to see part 2 of all the remaining gym leaders. It'll definitely happen eventually, since Candice and Volkner are my favourite Sinnoh gym leaders, but given all the video ideas I want to put out this year, it might be a while. But either way, if you like what you see, why not check out more of my content? I've got plenty of other YouTube videos where I share my art, so feel free to subscribe if you're interested. You can also follow me on Instagram, where I post even more art. There's a link in the description. My next video is probably going to be another Pokemon video, or something completely out of left field. Only time will tell. But until then, stay hopeful, don't give up on your dreams, don't skip the gym trainers or you'll lose out on EXP, and I'll see you all next time.